It was supposed to be a simple field trip. 14 students, one driver, a bright yellow bus heading toward the Colorado Rockies. They left just after sunrise. The sky was clear. The mountains were quiet. And by nightfall, they were gone. No crash, no debris, no signal, just silence. For 19 years, families searched every mile of that road. Every spring when the snow melted, they came back, hoping to find something, anything. But the mountains kept their secret until last winter. A construction crew expanding an access road near Redvale hit a tunnel that wasn't on any map. Inside, perfectly preserved in the dark, sat the missing school bus. Its headlights were still on. The seats were empty, and the odometer had recorded 19 more miles than the day it disappeared. If this happened in your town, what would you believe? Where are you watching from? Comment your country below. It started like any other school morning. The sound of sneakers on pavement, the laughter of teenagers echoing across the parking lot, the smell of diesel as the bus engine warmed beneath the cold mountain air. It was October 2002 in a quiet Colorado town called Redvale, a place surrounded by pines and silence, where nothing ever seemed to happen. 14 students from Ridgemont High climbed aboard the bus that morning. They were heading for a weekend science retreat, a trip their teacher had been planning for months. The route was simple: follow Highway 145, cut through the old mining pass, and arrive by noon at the Timber Ridge Research Camp. A short, safe drive through familiar roads, at least, that's what everyone thought. The driver was Thomas Greer, a 50-year-old veteran of the route. He'd driven those winding roads for decades. He knew every turn, every mile marker, every point where radio signals vanished between the cliffs. The students trusted him. So did their parents. He was the kind of man who waved to every car that passed, and who always made it home on time. That morning, the bus rolled out of the school parking lot at 7:42 a.m. Cameras caught the moment on a nearby gas station's CCTV feed. 14 waving hands pressed against the windows, sunlight flashing on the glass. Then the bus turned the corner, heading west into the mountains, and disappeared from view. The last radio check came 20 minutes later. Greer's voice was calm, steady. "All good up here. We'll lose signal for a bit through the ridge," he said. The dispatcher replied, "Copy that. See you on the other side." That side never came. At 9:03 a.m., the bus failed to arrive at Timber Ridge. At first, no one panicked. Cell coverage was poor, and mountain fog had rolled in early that day. Maybe they stopped for a break. Maybe the road was closed. But by noon, parents started calling. By 2, the sheriff's office issued a missing vehicle alert. When search teams arrived, they followed the route mile by mile, tracing the road's twists, scanning every ravine, checking every old tunnel. But the road ended where it always did, a dead curve before the ridge. And beyond that, nothing. The strange part wasn't what they found. It was what they didn't. No tire marks, no broken glass, no skid trails. It was as if the bus had simply evaporated. That night, the search expanded into the forest. Volunteers combed the woods with flashlights and dogs. Helicopters scanned the cliffs with thermal imaging. The only thing they picked up was residual heat along the ridge, like something had moved there recently. But when teams reached the spot, there was only an empty tunnel sealed by a landslide decades old, or so they thought. Parents gathered at the sheriff's office through the night waiting for any news. Some refused to leave. One father, Mark Fenton, kept replaying the gas station footage on his laptop. That final image of his daughter waving from the window, frozen mid-motion. He paused it, rewound, and zoomed in on the driver's mirror. There was something faint, a reflection behind them, too large to be another car, too slow to be smoke. Something following. Investigators dismissed it as distortion. But Mark didn't. He drove that same route the next morning alone. He reached the ridge at dawn and stood by the barricade that marked the end of the road. And that's when he noticed something else. The asphalt was warm. It had rained overnight, but the surface beneath his boots was dry, like heat was coming from below. He knelt, pressed his hand against it. The vibration was faint but rhythmic, almost like breathing. The official report never mentioned that detail. Maybe it didn't matter, or maybe it mattered too much. Over the following week, over 100 searchers scoured 20 miles of mountain road. The case reached national news. Theories flooded in. Mechanical failure, landslide, abduction, even government experiment. But without evidence, it all became noise. By November, the search was called off. The families refused to accept that. They came back every year. Birthdays, anniversaries, any date that meant something, leaving flowers by the ridge. They built a memorial there, a wooden sign with 14 names burned into its surface. Every time they came, the sign had shifted slightly, as if the ground beneath it moved. Years passed. New roads were built. Tourists came and went. The story faded into whispers. The Red Veil Ridge vanishings. Just another legend in a country full of unsolved disappearances. Until last winter, when construction crews working to widen the same highway hit something hard below the soil. The machinery jammed, metal screeching against wood. They stopped, thinking it was an old mining support. But when they cleared the dirt, they saw paint, yellow paint, and then glass. They called it in immediately. By nightfall, floodlights illuminated the site. Investigators climbed down into the opening, expecting debris. What they saw instead made every man freeze in place. It was the school bus, perfectly intact, no rust, no collapse, and in the windshield's reflection, their own faces stared back. Older, pale, ghost-like. The license plate matched. The stickers were the same. But the clock on the dashboard was still ticking. It had never stopped. The battery, long dead in any normal condition, was somehow alive, humming quietly in the dark. They pulled the door handle. It opened without resistance. Inside, the seats were clean. No mold, no dust. Just empty. 14 backpacks lay where they should have. One notebook sat open on the aisle floor. The last written words read, "Tunnel 2 is longer than it looks." No one spoke. They all felt it, and that the air inside was wrong. Too warm, too still. And somewhere deeper in the tunnel, a low sound echoed. A mechanical groan. A slow inhale, like the mountain itself had just woken up. And that's when the floodlight died. One by one, every lamp along the tunnel flickered and went dark. In total blackness, the crew stumbled out, gasping for air. They didn't stop running until they reached daylight. When they looked back, the entrance had changed. It was smaller now, half its size, and the bus was gone again. The next morning, when investigators returned, the tunnel had sealed itself completely, as if it had never been there. The equipment was still on site, buried under fresh rockfall. No entry, no air, no trace of the bus. But 2 days later, a new image appeared on a nearby security feed. At 3:14 a.m., a camera on a closed stretch of road facing the ridge caught headlights. Twin beams glowing faintly in the fog. The timestamp read 19 years later. Would you drive through that mountain again? Would you trust the road that forgets? Because somewhere under the snow, beneath all that stone, something remembers the route, and it's still moving. The mountain was sealed for weeks after the discovery. No one was allowed near the ridge. State Patrol blocked every road that led to the site. And still, people came. Families, journalists, even strangers who claimed they'd heard the bus before anyone had found it. They said they'd heard the horn echoing from the woods late at night. 14 short blasts, always in the same order. When the investigation finally resumed, it was under federal control. The FBI arrived quietly without press or warning. They called it a geological survey, though everyone knew what it really was. Men in black jackets set up floodlights and ground-penetrating scanners. They mapped every inch of the ridge, every echo beneath the surface. The readings came back strange. The tunnel they'd seen before, the one where the bus sat, was gone. But the data showed something else. 3 new voids all connected, extending nearly a mile into the mountain. One of the agents described the layout as too symmetrical to be natural. Another said it looked like rooms. They called in a special excavation crew, men who'd worked disaster recoveries in cave-ins. Their job was to reopen the tunnel carefully, inch by inch, without destabilizing the ridge. For 2 days nothing unusual happened. Just rock, dirt, layers of clay, until they hit the first wooden beam. It wasn't part of the original structure. It was newer. It had been nailed into the stone. By day 3 they reached the first chamber. Inside they found tools, pickaxes, helmets, work gloves, all arranged neatly on a wooden table. No dust, no decay, as if someone had placed them there just moments before the team arrived. The helmets were marked with the school's initials, RH. Each bore a name scratched into the lining. Names that matched the missing students. The crew stepped back. No one spoke for a while. The silence felt heavier than the mountain itself. Finally, the lead agent, a man named Russell Hale, turned to his radio. He called for a live feed to headquarters. Static filled the line. Then a sound came through, soft, rhythmic, uneven. Not words, not machinery, a pulse, like breathing. They shut the radio off. By evening, the second chamber was uncovered. This one was different. Colder. Metallic. The walls were lined with panels that shimmered under the floodlights, almost like polished steel, but warped. Every few feet, markings were carved into the surface, numbers, coordinates, dates. And one phrase repeated again and again. Tunnel 2 is longer than it looks. The same words from the notebook found on the bus. They took photos, samples, recordings. Every time the flash went off, the camera picked up something the human eye couldn't see. Shapes in the corner, faint outlines near the wall, like figures just out of reach. Some of the crew refused to go back in after that. One of them, a man named Dixon, quit that night. He told reporters later that he'd heard voices in the tunnel, whispering names that weren't his. He said they sounded young. On the 5th day, a storm hit the ridge. Snow fell so thick that even the floodlights vanished behind the white curtain. Work stopped. Only Agent Hale and 2 engineers stayed behind to secure the site. They camped by the entrance inside a portable shelter. Sometime after midnight, one of them woke to a sound outside, metal scraping against stone. He unzipped the tent and stepped out. There, half buried in snow, stood the bus, the same bus. No tires, no license plate, no tracks leading in or out. Its headlights were on again, faint, flickering. Inside, through the windshield, he swore he saw silhouettes. 14 of them, still, facing forward, waiting. He screamed for Hale, but by the time the others ran out, the bus was gone. Only the snow remained, smooth and untouched, as if nothing had ever been there. The next morning, the camp was silent. No radio signal, no sound. A rescue team arrived by noon. They found Hale and the 2 engineers still in their tent, alive but unresponsive. Eyes open, pupils fixed, lips moving as if whispering something no one else could hear. The only words anyone could make out were the same over and over. Second tunnel. Second tunnel. Second tunnel. They were airlifted out within the hour. None of them ever spoke again. For months, the ridge was shut down completely. No official explanation was released. The FBI files were sealed under Project Northwood, a classification used for unexplained geological anomalies. Local papers speculated about sinkholes, gas leaks, hypnosis. But people who lived nearby knew better. They'd heard the engines at night. They'd seen the headlights gliding through fog where no road existed. And every time it snowed, someone said they could see faint tire tracks forming across the ridge, just long enough to follow, before they disappeared again under the frost. Years later, hikers still find small things buried in that snow. An old compass, a cracked student ID card, even a half-melted keychain shaped like a school bus. Every item marked the same way, etched with fresh scratches that shouldn't be there. 14 marks. Always 14. And once in a while, when the air gets thin enough and the wind moves just right, you can hear it again. Faint, distant, somewhere deep inside the mountain. The echo of a horn. 14 short blasts, always in the same order. Would you follow the sound if you heard it? Would you keep walking, even when the tunnel you find isn't supposed to exist? Or would you turn back before it remembers you too? ChatGPT perfect, Mustafa. We keep the same tone, smooth, spoken, atmospheric. Every sentence written for a human narrator's breath, not for a reader's eye. What you're about to hear is Chapter 3. The recordings told as if the camera never cuts and the voice never falters. A calm descent into something the world was never supposed to hear. The tapes were found 6 months later. A forestry crew clearing storm damage along the Red Veil Ridge uncovered a rusted lockbox lodged between roots of a fallen pine. Inside were 4 cassette tapes, each labeled in faded ink. Tunnel 2 followed by a number. The recordings were immediately sent to the state lab in Denver. No one expected them to play, but they did. The first tape began with static, then a man's voice. Calm, professional, confident. This is Special Agent Russell Hale. Field Recording Project Northwood. Entry 1, Initial Descent. You can hear boots crunching gravel. The echo of a flashlight tapping against a metal wall. He describes the tunnel as narrow, newly formed, possibly unstable. Then something strange, a pause. He says, "There's writing here. Looks like chalk." The words are... The tape cuts out. The second tape starts immediately afterward. No introduction, no order. Just breathing. You can hear several people moving, shovels scraping dirt, voices whispering in the background. Then Hale again, his tone lower now. Day 2. Temperature has dropped to 41. Air quality is normal. We've located Chamber B. He stops. You can hear him exhale. Then quietly he says, It's not empty. He doesn't explain what he means. Instead, you hear faint sounds like fingers drumming on wood, slow, deliberate. 14 beats, then silence. A female voice follows, nervous, barely audible. "Agent Hale, it's counting." Another man replies, "No, it's signaling." Then footsteps, running, a thud. The tape ends. The third recording opens with distortion. At first, it sounds like electrical interference, but when filtered, the pattern forms words. Repeating layered phrases. A voice whispering, "Well, don't dig below." The same message carved inside the first tunnel. But here the voice isn't Hale's. It's a young girl's. And in the background you can hear water dripping. Steady, rhythmic, echoing like a heartbeat. When investigators analyzed the waveform, they found an anomaly. Every 10 seconds the recording skips as if time itself is missing a frame. Each gap measures exactly 19 milliseconds. The same number of years between the disappearance and the discovery. The final tape, the fourth one, is different. It starts with nothing but wind. You can hear the tape crackle, hiss, rewind, play again. Then a sound like footsteps on hollow wood. And then Hale's voice returns, weak, trembling. "This is Day. I don't know. We found something new. A room below the cabin. A sound coming through the walls. It's not wind. It's voices. They're alive down here. They've been alive the whole time." You can hear someone scream his name. You can hear the sound of metal bending, the floor giving way. Then something else, laughter. Not cruel, not human exactly. Soft, almost relieved. Then the tape cuts to static. When the technician who played the recordings finished, she stood up and walked out of the room without saying a word. She resigned 2 days later. In her written statement, she described one final detail that no one else could verify. She said the tapes weren't old. The ink on the labels was still wet. After the discovery, the lockbox vanished from evidence storage. The logbook was signed out by Agent Hale, but Hale had never recovered after the Ridge incident. He'd been institutionalized, unable to speak or even recognize faces. The signature on the log matched his exactly, perfectly. No one knows where the tapes are now. But new copies keep surfacing online. Short clips uploaded to obscure forums, each tagged with the same 3 letters, T2L. Most of them are obvious fakes. Some are convincing, and one uploaded in early 2023 sounds too real to dismiss. It begins with static, then a whisper. If you're hearing this, we're still here. That's when the file stops. No ending, no timestamp. Just the same rhythm looping again and again. 14 knocks in the dark. When digital analysts slowed the track to 1/10 speed, they found something chilling hidden in the echo. A faint voice counting softly beneath the knocks. 1, 2, 3. It stops at 14, then whispers, "Your turn." Imagine finding a recording like that. Hearing those voices, not through speakers but through walls. Would you press play again? Would you keep listening, knowing every sound you hear might be coming from somewhere that still exists, somewhere still awake beneath the mountain? Because that's what the investigators realized too late. The tapes weren't captured from inside the tunnels. They were broadcast to them. A year after the tapes surfaced, a man came forward. He called himself Daniel Frost. Said he'd worked as a highway inspector during the early days of the Red Veil project. He wasn't listed in any of the official logs. No record, no badge number, no payroll file. But he knew details no one outside the investigation could have known. The tunnel layout, the coded phrases, even the word containment. He didn't want to meet in person. Only by phone. The call lasted 48 minutes. Half of it was silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry, strained, as if he hadn't used it in years. He said, "You can dig a tunnel through anything. Rock, clay, concrete. But once you reach what's living underneath, you can't bury it again." He said he'd been there on the first night when the bus disappeared. He wasn't part of the school. He was part of the road crew repairing the second tunnel. He remembered the rumble first, a deep vibration like thunder. Then lights flashing in the distance. He thought it was a truck. It wasn't. He saw the yellow bus drive straight into the mountain. No crash, no explosion. It just kept going. Straight through the stone like the rock had turned to liquid. He said the mountain swallowed it. The dispatcher on the other end laughed nervously, thought he was joking. But Frost's voice didn't change. He said, "The mountain opened because we made it open. We drilled where we weren't supposed to. There's something under the second tunnel. Something that breathes." When asked what he meant, he told a story that sounded impossible. He said that before the bus vanished, the road crew kept finding strange cavities underground. Perfect circles, smooth walls, and air that felt warm like an animal's breath. Every time they filled one in, a new one appeared the next day. And every single one pointed toward the same direction, the ridge where the bus disappeared. He said the crew joked about ghosts, but one of them, a man named Keaton, stopped laughing after the 3rd week. He claimed to hear tapping from inside the rock and was slow, steady, deliberate. 14 knocks. Always 14. When Keaton went missing, they thought he'd quit. His truck was still parked by the road, his keys still in the ignition, and a single word written in the dust on the dashboard, 2. When Frost finished his story, the call went quiet again. He said one last thing before hanging up. They were never supposed to find the bus. It wasn't a vehicle anymore. It was a door. And they opened it twice, the line disconnected, and just like that, he was gone. 2 days later, the number he'd used no longer existed. It wasn't disconnected, and it had never been assigned. Investigators traced it to a payphone in a rest stop outside Durango. When they checked security footage, the payphone was missing from the wall. The wires were there, The phone was gone, but something else was captured on the footage. At 11:47 p.m., a school bus passed behind the camera, yellow, dented, headlights dim. It turned toward the ridge road the same direction as before. Except that section had been closed for 19 years. That video was never made public. But one still frame leaked online a few weeks later. The bus is blurry, caught in motion, but through the front windshield you can see the outline of a man sitting in the driver's seat. He's looking directly at the camera, and his face looks exactly like Thomas Greer, the driver who vanished in 2002. Experts called it a hoax. The families called it proof, but something about the photo didn't match. When the image was enhanced, the date stamp on the bus dashboard came into focus. It read day 14. No one knew what that meant, until someone compared it to the tapes. Each recording file name had ended with the same number. 14. 14 students. 14 knocks. 14 marks scratched into the snow, and now, day 14. There's a theory that started after that photo. One no official ever confirmed but everyone whispered about. They said the bus wasn't traveling through time. It was completing a loop. That every 19 years it reappeared. That it was never really gone, just moving beneath the surface, following a route no one could see. And if that's true, it means the next reappearance would happen in 2021, right after the tunnels reopened for construction. The same time the crew found the lockbox. The same month those headlights appeared again. Daniel Frost was never found. But a new voicemail appeared on one of the investigators' phones months later. A single sentence whispered by a familiar voice. "Tell them we're still driving." The message came from a number traced to Redvale High School, a number that had been deactivated since 2002. You can almost hear it now, can't you? The sound of an old bus engine echoing across the valley. The squeal of tires on a road that shouldn't exist anymore. It's moving under the ground, beneath the town, beneath everything. And if you listen close enough, you'll realize something terrifying. It's not heading toward the mountain. It's heading back. It began with lights on the ridge. At first, people thought they were flares. Orange glows flickering between the trees, rising and falling like fireflies too heavy to fly. But they moved in straight lines. 14 of them. Always 14. Locals started posting about it on social media. Videos shot from porches, car dashboards, cell phones held against windows. The lights appeared at the same time every night, 11:47 p.m. That was the exact time the original bus disappeared from the school's cameras in 2002. Coincidence, maybe. But after the fourth night, no one thought it was funny anymore. In one clip, you can hear a voice behind the camera whisper, "They're getting closer." The lights weren't just hovering now, they were moving down the ridge toward town. And the sound came next. Low, mechanical, like an engine caught between gears. A steady growl fading in and out, sometimes near, sometimes far. People described it as the sound of a bus idling somewhere it shouldn't be. By the seventh night, the sheriff's department blocked off the entire area. Power lines flickered, radios hissed, even cell towers cut out for miles. The mountain went dark, but the lights kept moving, slowly, deliberately. The next morning, a group of hikers found tire tracks in the snow leading into a stretch of forest where no road existed. The tracks stopped at a dead end beside a half-buried road sign. It was bent, rusted, impossible to read, but one letter was still clear, R for Redvale. FBI teams arrived again within days, sealing the valley completely this time. Locals were told the area was closed for environmental stabilization, but everyone could see the trucks, the tents, the floodlights through the fog. They weren't stabilizing anything. They were digging. Witnesses reported seeing the same bus again, parked on the old ridge road, headlights dim, windshield cracked. No driver inside. No students. But when agents opened the doors, the seats weren't empty. They were filled with something else. shapes made of dust and soil, molded into the form of bodies, each one seated neatly, facing forward, hands on laps. Like passengers waiting for a ride that never ends. They tried to remove one of the figures. It crumbled instantly, disintegrating into a cloud that smelled faintly of iron and smoke. The agent closest to it collapsed. He was breathing but unresponsive, eyes open, mouth moving silently. When medics arrived, they realized he was mouthing words, the same ones from the tapes. "Don't dig below." After that, the excavation stopped, but something else started happening. Homes in Redvale began reporting strange vibrations beneath their floors at night. Objects would rattle, pictures would fall from walls. In one house, a child's toy bus started rolling across the room by itself, back and forth, over and over, always stopping in the same direction, north toward the ridge. By December, the noise spread. It wasn't just the ridge anymore. It was the whole town. Every night at the same time, 11:47, a faint hum could be heard beneath the streets. Not loud, not frightening at first, but constant. And beneath that hum, if you listened closely, something else. A voice, sometimes a whisper. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes just the echo of an engine that shouldn't still be running. Then came the snowstorm. The heaviest in 30 years. Roads vanished under 6 feet of ice and slush. Redvale was cut off completely for 3 days. When it finally cleared, half the town's vehicles wouldn't start. Engines frozen. Batteries drained, metal frames covered in a thin layer of yellow dust. Like pollen? But it wasn't pollen. It was paint. Yellow paint. A local mechanic scraped it off for testing. It matched the same chemical composition used in school bus coatings from the early 2000s. He joked about it, said maybe the bus was shedding its skin. 2 days later, he was gone. His shop lights were still on. The door unlocked. The radio playing, a song on loop. The same one the students had sung on the day of the trip, Country Roads. The chorus repeated endlessly, "Take me home," over and over, until someone turned it off. After that, people started leaving Redvale. Families packed up without warning. Shops closed. Schools emptied. Within 6 months, the town was nearly deserted. Only a few stayed, mostly those too old or too stubborn to leave. They said they didn't hear anything, but they all kept their windows shut tight. And sometimes when the wind died down, you could see a faint light reflecting off their glass, a pair of headlights slowly passing by. Even when there was no road left to drive, you have to wonder what's really under that mountain now, if the tunnels are still there. If the air still carries that low, steady hum, or if the bus is still moving, trapped between roads that never existed, still carrying its passengers forward through the dark. They say the sound travels underground, through pipes, through concrete, through the bones of the town itself. Sometimes it's just a vibration under your feet. Sometimes it's a whisper behind the walls. But if you ever hear an engine idling at midnight and you live nowhere near a road, don't look for the source, because if you hear it, it means the bus has already passed once, and it always passes twice. They say Redvale used to be the kind of place that never made the news. One gas station, one diner, one high school football team that hadn't won a game in 10 years. People knew each other by name. Doors stayed unlocked, and the loudest sound most nights was the hum of the highway a few miles away. Now it's quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one feels heavier, like the whole town is holding its breath. After the storm, most of Redvale's remaining residents disappeared. Some left on their own, some didn't. Mail piled up. Cars sat frozen in driveways. The lights in the diner window stayed on for weeks after the owner was gone, flickering every night at exactly 11:47. When the power company came to shut it off, the meters showed no electricity had been used since the snowstorm, but the lights still worked. A documentary crew arrived the following summer trying to film what was left. They called the project "The Town That Stopped Breathing." The footage was never released. Only fragments survived. A few frames leaked online showing what they found. Empty streets, wind pushing open doors, school papers scattered across the floors, and graffiti all over the walls written in chalk or scratched into the paint. 14 names. The same ones from the memorial sign by the ridge. In one clip, the cameraman walks through the abandoned high school gymnasium. You can hear his footsteps echo across the floor, then a faint noise like laughter drifting through the hall. He turns, whispers, "Did you hear that?" But there's no one behind him. Just the sound of something metallic rolling across the floor, a basketball painted yellow. When the crew reviewed the footage later, they noticed something else. Every time the camera passed a window, the reflection showed movement, a flash of light like headlights turning a corner. But the roads outside were empty. There was nothing left for miles except snow and silence. That night, the crew stayed in what was left of the motel near the edge of town. Around midnight, one of them heard the sound of an engine outside. Not close, just distant enough to seem unreal. A low growl fading in and out. He looked through the blinds and froze. The road outside was buried under 4 feet of snow. But there, half visible through the fog, were 2 lines of light moving past the window. Twin beams sweeping slowly across the glass. Headlights. He said they stopped for a moment, pointed directly at his room, then drifted away. He didn't sleep after that. The next morning, the crew found tire tracks in the snow, leading around the motel and back toward the ridge. They matched the same pattern found in 2002, tread marks from a retired school bus model no longer in service. The team packed up and left that afternoon. Only one man stayed behind, their sound engineer, Mark Leland. He said he'd recorded something during the night, something he needed to understand. He played the tape later that week in his studio. It started like white noise, wind, static, interference. Then buried deep in the sound, a voice. A man's voice. He was counting. Slow, calm, steady. 1, 2, 3. When he reached 14, he stopped. Then another voice joined in, this one higher, softer, almost childlike. Your turn. Mark never finished the recording. Neighbors found his studio door open, lights on, speakers still playing that same looping sound, but the voice was gone. Only the low hum of an engine remained, and faintly under that hum the click of a turn signal. Left, right, always in rhythm. After that, Red Vale was officially declared uninhabitable. The government called it an environmental hazard. Methane gas, soil instability, contamination. But the reports never mentioned the air tests or the recordings or the 14 distinct heat signatures still visible on satellite scans, taken months after the last evacuation, each one the same size, the same shape, moving in the same direction. Down the mountain. Years later, hikers still find things there. A shoe in perfect condition, half buried under ice. A textbook frozen open to a page about sound waves and frequency. Even a bus seat, rusted but intact, sitting alone in the snow as if someone placed it there. Every object pointing downhill, toward something waiting. Satellite photos show faint outlines in the snow, patterns that shouldn't exist, curves that form the shape of a loop, spiraling inward. At the center of that spiral, the same coordinates where the first sinkhole opened. And in the newest image, taken just last winter, there's something else. 2 pinpoints of light, faint but visible, glowing through the snow. Headlights, buried deep below. If you visit Red Vale now, there's almost nothing left. Just trees, snow, and silence. But every once in a while, you might find a stretch of road still visible through the frost. And if you follow it long enough, you'll come to a sign. It's rusted, bent, nearly erased by time. But if the light hits it just right, you can still make out the words. Field trip route. They say the road remembers every name that's ever traveled it. That's why the signs never fade and why the sound never stops. Because somewhere under that frozen mountain, a bus is still driving. No passengers. No destination. Just motion. Endless, patient motion through the dark. And every 19 years it finds its way back to where it began. Maybe it's already turning around. Maybe the hum you hear tonight isn't your own car but something older, slower, still following its route. So if you ever drive through Colorado on a quiet winter night, and you see a pair of headlights appear behind you, don't stop. Don't look back. Because if you do, you'll see 14 faces staring back through the glass, and they'll be smiling. For nearly 20 years the mountain was silent. No lights, no sound. Just frozen wind and the weight of time pressing down on Red Vale's empty ridge. Then, on the night of December 11th, 2021, the silence broke. A highway maintenance camera, set up 20 miles south of the old tunnel site, recorded something strange at 11:47 p.m. Two beams of light appeared out of the darkness, cutting through falling snow. Headlights, old ones, round, uneven, flickering, the kind used on early 2000s school buses. They drifted slowly into frame, then stopped. No movement, no driver, just the quiet hum of an engine that shouldn't exist anymore. And after 13 seconds, the lights went out. At first, the footage was dismissed as an optical glitch caused by freezing fog. But the next night, the same lights appeared again. This time in a different location, the closer to the ridge. And behind them, faintly visible through the haze, came 12 more. 14 in total. Always 14. A few locals still living near Elk River reported seeing the lights that week. They said they moved like a convoy and slow, steady, silent. No tire marks, no noise, just the smell of exhaust in the snow and the faint sound of children singing somewhere far away. When investigators returned to the site days later, they found something new. The snow had melted in a perfect line, forming the outline of a road that shouldn't have been there. No one could explain how the ground was warm when the temperature outside was 15 below zero. Samples were taken. They showed traces of sulfur, paint, and motor oil. The same three substances found in the tunnels back in 2002. That night a storm rolled in. The team stayed in their vehicles waiting for it to pass. At 2:14 a.m., one of them, a young officer named Avery, looked up from his logbook and saw headlights reflecting in the rearview mirror. He thought it was another vehicle. He blinked. The lights were closer now. Too close. He stepped out of the truck to wave them off. But when he turned around, there was nothing behind him. Just the sound of an idling engine echoing from somewhere underground. The next morning, Avery was gone. His footprints led 20 feet into the snow and stopped abruptly. His radio was found still transmitting, a faint static pulse repeating every few seconds. When technicians analyzed the pattern later, they realized it wasn't random. It was Morse code, 14 short signals, followed by one word: below. Within days, the story spread online. Clips from the camera leaked onto message boards, news sites, conspiracy channels. Some claimed to see faces in the fog, shapes inside the light beams. Others said they heard laughter mixed into the static. Most people just scrolled past. Another mystery in a world already full of them. But one man didn't. A truck driver named Raymond Ellis was passing through the Rockies when he heard a voice on his CB radio. It was faint, barely a whisper beneath the static. A girl's voice. She said, "We're almost home." The signal repeated every hour, always at 11:47, and every time it played, his truck's headlights flickered, as if something else nearby was trying to sync with them. On the fourth night, his dash camera caught something the human eye couldn't. A reflection in the mirror behind him. A school bus following in the distance, headlights off, moving in total silence. Then the feed cut out. The footage ends with Raymond's voice, nervous but steady. He says, "There's no road here. There's no road here." Then a long breath, then static. His truck was found 2 days later, parked neatly on an abandoned service route. The engine was still warm. The door was open, and in the passenger seat sat a child's backpack. Inside was a class photo dated 2002, 14 students, all smiling, and behind them through the window, something that hadn't been there before, a dark shape, a reflection of the mountain itself, leaning forward. Sometimes people ask why the story of Red Veil still matters, why it refuses to fade, why it keeps resurfacing no matter how many times it's buried. Maybe it's because the road is still there, or maybe because the passengers never stopped traveling. Maybe they're still trying to find their way home, and maybe the only thing keeping them moving is us. Every time we watch, every time we remember, every time we listen, because the hum never stopped. The headlights never went out, and the road never ended. It just changed direction. For months after the sightings, the lights stopped. No one saw the bus. No engines, no laughter, no knocks. Just wind crawling through the canyons and the echo of what had already happened. Then, in February of 2022, the Red Veil frequency came back online. A radio technician in Denver scanning emergency bands caught a faint signal at exactly 11:47 p.m. It wasn't a voice at first, just a pulse, slow and constant. Then the static shifted. A voice broke through, soft, calm, tired. "This is Thomas Greer," it said, "the missing driver, requesting check-in. 14 passengers on board. Condition stable. Road clear." The technician froze. The signal was weak but clear. She tried to respond, but the radio jammed, and before she could speak, the voice returned. "We've been on the road for 19 years. Heading back. Don't dig below. Don't follow." Then silence. But the transmission didn't end. The signal kept looping, repeating every night at the same time. Always the same message. Until March, when it changed. That night the voice sounded closer. Breathing louder, tone heavier. It said, "Tunnel 2 reached. Preparing for descent." Then another voice joined in. A child's. She whispered, "He found us." Static swallowed the rest. When they traced the source, it wasn't from the mountains. It was from beneath the Denver transmission tower, 270 miles away from Red Veil. Technicians dug into the snow to check for faulty wiring. They didn't find wires. They found tire marks. The investigation went dark after that. No press release. No official explanation. Just a single memo leaked from the Bureau weeks later. It read, "Operation Red Veil terminated. Site sealed. Subjects mobile." To this day, the frequency sometimes activates without warning. You can hear it if you tune between 1483 and 1487 megahertz. A soft hum, followed by a voice counting quietly in the static. 1, 2, 3, always to 14. And then the same words, still whispered like a prayer. "We're almost home." Some say it's interference from old broadcast lines. Others think it's nothing more than atmosphere, a reflection of radio waves bouncing through the mountains. But if you listen long enough, you'll start to notice something else, the timing. Every time a new storm forms over Colorado, the signal gets stronger. Every time snow begins to fall, it grows louder. And sometimes, if you're close enough to the ridge, you'll hear it not through the radio, but through the ground itself. The vibration, the hum, the faint rhythm of an engine that never stopped running. Locals don't go near the old roads anymore. Not because they're haunted, but because they move. The asphalt cracks, shifts, then smooths itself again, like something underneath is pushing upward. One night, a storm chaser caught drone footage of the valley. For a few seconds before the feed cut out, the snow rippled like water, and in the reflection of the drone's lights, you could see the faint curve of metal beneath the surface, a roofline. Yellow. A week later, that drone was found 10 miles away, buried in the snow. Its battery was dead. Its camera still recording. The last image it captured was of a single headlight, flickering in the dark. And beneath it a message carved into the snow, 14 lines, perfectly straight, and one word below them. Return. The frequency hasn't gone silent since. Sometimes it skips. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes you can almost make out voices singing softly in the static. The same tune from the day the students left. Take me home. It plays over and over until the signal fades. And then right before it disappears completely, you hear a sound in the background. A door closing, an engine starting, and a voice clear and steady. This is Thomas Greer. 14 passengers accounted for. Commencing second route. After that, nothing, just silence. Long, patient silence that feels like it's waiting for someone to answer. Maybe that someone is you. Because if you're hearing this, maybe you've already tuned in. Maybe you've already felt that faint vibration under your feet when the night gets too quiet. Maybe the hum you think is the highway isn't the highway at all. And maybe, just maybe, the road has already found you. Some stories were never meant to stay buried. Don't let them vanish, let's keep them alive with us.